Hey retro gamers. Today on Smashing Bricks, we get pulled into the pages of our own comic book in the 1995 beat-em-up Comix Zone for the SEGA Genesis. Hey, welcome to episode 12 of Smashing Bricks, a retro gaming podcast. My name is Eddie Inzauto, and today I'm here with an old friend and head of community at Robot Cache, Kyle Stallock. Hey, man.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going well. It's been nice to revisit this game that I have opinions about. So,
this
yes.
game that I have opinions about. I like that. That's a good start.
As you know me, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. You know, you are the first person I ever recorded a quote-unquote podcast with in my entire life. We didn't call it a podcast, but do you remember what it was?
I think we were talking about, what game was it? No, what were we talking about? I can't remember.
It was a fireside chat with Eddie and Kyle on GTA 4 following your 8.7 review score and my column titled something like The Holy Grail in response to the industry's glowing reception to that game when we thought it was good.
It was good. You gotta add in controversial 8.7 to that.
Highly controversial. I think they stopped working with GamerNode after that.
They did.
Rockstar.
They did. We got blacklisted.
Yeah. It was your fault. Oh, well.
Oh, my God.
Anyway, so that's the past, which I deal with a lot here on Smashing Bricks. But I also want to know about your present. So what are you doing now? Community at Robot Cache.
Yeah. Robot Cache is a digital distribution platform that was funded by the community, actually. We are kind of like a competitor to Steam, but we don't see ourselves kind of that way. What makes us unique is that we give about 95% of the proceeds of every sale to the developer or publisher, which is the highest of any major platform. Like some only give 50%, some give 30%. No one does really 5% or 95% like we do, or 5%, however you want to say it. And then we also allow gamers to sell their purchases that they make on Robot Cache to other users. So we're the first gaming digital distribution platform to allow the resale of your games. And then other people can earn rewards and buy free games, actually, if you download our client and then just click to kind of use your PC, like your CPU and your GPU, to earn currency that you can use in our platform. So we do a lot of things. We're going to be widely available soon. We are only available in certain countries right now, but if anyone listening wants to, jump aboard, I may be able to get you whitelisted. And then I can maybe, you know what, Eddie, I'm going to say this now. I'll be able to give you some free games and maybe some free games to your audience too. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. I like the sound of that. So that's really cool with the ability of users to resell their games. So that's something like I have now 700-800 games on my Steam, in my Steam library, and I'm not going to play them all. So this is just a way essentially for me to like recoup a few bucks for each of these games and then basically give those games at a discount to other people.
You can't do it. You basically flag your game that it's going to be that you want to sell it, and then it goes into the pool with the new releases that are out there. And then when people are buying a game, it will kind of randomly give them either a used one, quote unquote. We don't really like to call it used because it's a digital copy. It's not like, you have the smell of the other person's house on your digital copy. But it'll randomly pick from one of those, and then you'll get we're kind of figuring out the split, and it can change depending on the title and the agreements with the publishers. But generally, you'll get like 25% of the sale for that. Certainly not the full price, but this is a really tricky area that we're entering now, which is digital reselling. And we don't like to really say it reselling either, because it's a digital copy. It's not your copy. You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's a lot of terminology we're working out for, but we really want to give a lot of freedom and rights back to the gamers that they didn't have before through digital.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
used to be able to buy your game and then sell it, to someone at GameStop or other things like that. And then there's a lot of things that we're doing. We're certainly not as big. We're a small team. I think we're in total like 17 people. Working in remote in San Diego, and I'm in Los Angeles. So I really hope people come aboard with us, because we're really trying to change the industry and, make a better creative haven for developers. You don't really need to sell as many copies if you're getting 95% of the take versus 50% on another platform that maybe I won't name.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that sounds great for developers, for publishers, for the end user. I really like the sound of that. I mean, because 25%, that's better than zero back, and I'm never going to play it in my life.
Exactly. And I have like 3,000 games on Steam now, so it's like, what am I going to do with that?
Okay, but what you don't have on Steam, what you have instead on your Genesis Mini, is our game of the month, Comix Zone.
I do, and it's on, and it's right in front of me right now. To paint a picture, I have my Genesis Mini up on the TV stand. I have the mixer, and on the stand as well, I have my microphone sitting on my lap, and I have it's an awkward situation. And like I told you, Eddie, beforehand, if my wife walks into this room, it's going to be just a really embarrassing situation. I have clothes on though, so that's good.
Good to know. All right, so first we're going to start with a little bit of the history about this game. We're going to go through that pretty quick. Then we're going to hit our histories with the game, and then go into this most recent play, as we typically do here. So, Comix Zone was originally released on the SEGA Genesis on August 2nd, 1995 in North America, and then followed in Japan in September and PAL regions in October, and then hit Windows in the next month after that. This was developed by SEGA Technical Institute, which was originally started by Mark Cerny, but this was long after he left, and it was shortly after the departure of Yuji Naka, Yuji Naka from Sonic the Hedgehog fame. After Sonic and Knuckles, he left, and then this game was sort of whoever was left there was making Comix Zone. And we have our designer and writer, Peter Moravec, programmer Adrian Stevens, and composer Howard Drossen, or Drossen. In my notes here, I wrote Dross, and I knew that wasn't it. Okay. So this was SEGA Technical Institute. This was actually the development house that was responsible for a few of the Sonic games. It was a big deal. Then they did Comix Zone after they did Sonic Spinball. So the way it came about, like the history of this, was Marvick went to a comic shop with some of his STI coworkers who were all big comic book fans, and he suddenly got the idea for the game, so the story goes. He was also influenced by the music video for the Aha song "Take on Me."
What?
where he got drawn into the cartoon.
Yeah.
So what he did was he made a tech demo on his Amiga of Joe Pencil trapped in the Comix Zone, and he brought it to Roger Hector, the head of STI, who loved it, said pitch it to Sega of America CEO Tom Kalinske, and Kalinske said, yeah, but we have to put it on hold because we want Sonic Spinball for holiday 1993. So after that was done, they were able to finally work on Comix Zone, and it was developed by a team of a dozen people, including some comic book artists, Tony DeZuniga and Alex Nino. I'm not familiar with them, but hopefully any comic book fans in the audience are familiar. So this was, Joe Pencil was a geeky, skinny guy, sort of resembling Marvick himself. And they decided to change it to someone a little bit more beefy, like sort of grunge inspired, popular grunge music at the time. And Sega marketing asked for a sidekick. And Marvick said, I don't really want a sidekick. So he added a small rat friend, Roadkill.
Yeah.
Super important to the game, I found out, and didn't realize at first.
Pretty much.
But marketing didn't like having a sewer rat as the sidekick, but it stood anyway because he was backed by all the people there at STI. The artists drew the game out in pencil and ink like the real comic book process before having it scanned in and converted for the Genesis visuals. And all of this graphical data made it a little difficult to program in the space that was left while they were trying to fit it into a 2 megabyte cartridge. Oh my God, so much space. Can you believe that? 2 megabytes. That's what the Genesis cards were.
Back in my day.
Yeah. Now what do we have? 30 gigabytes? Oh my God.
Well, unless you're talking about like Warzone, and then you need like a separate terabyte hard drive just for that game. Easy joke.
Okay. Sega of Japan reviewed the game saying that this embodied everything that was wrong with American culture, and the team took that as high praise. Ultimately, the game was delayed a lot so they could add more features, and it got released super late in the Genesis life cycle. Sort of in competition now with the new systems like PlayStation, Sega Saturn, so it kind of wasn't super popular at the time. It wasn't super successful.
Yeah.
Also, the scope of the game was reduced at the very end because they wanted to get it out fast.
Knew it.
Sort of toward the end, there was pressure from Sega because there hadn't been a release since 93, holiday 93, and this was already 95. So they had to reduce the game in scope ultimately, even though they had been delaying it to expand the game. And then they had to remove 2 levels at the end of the game. And at the very end, Sega's testing department recommended the difficulty level be increased.
Yeah, because I want to
that later.
I want to talk more about that. Like, yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, so we will get into that. So what is it though? What is this game?
I mean, I would say it's a very traditional left to right beat 'em up, traditionally designed to eat your quarters. But this wasn't necessarily an arcade game, right? It was just a console game.
Yeah. Well, this was around the time that developers were actively thinking about the rental market.
Also. Oh, that's right. Because a lot of people would beat a game in a weekend and that would piss them off. And so they would change games specifically so that people would buy it instead of rent it.
Yeah, this is one of those. Because the game is surprisingly short.
Super short. And so that's what I wanted to say. Like, is this a game that, I was replaying it again. And I was like, this game doesn't feel finished. Like a lot of games from that era that seem like polished. It's just missing an extra layer, and it just feels like someone right before release turned a difficulty dial, and that's probably oversimplifying it. And also like story wise and everything, it feels like it was just missing some content.
Yeah, it's literally what happened, and you could tell. That's amazing.
Famously, what was it? The Halo pistol. What the original Halo pistol was changed in its damage and effectiveness right before launch. So that's why we got that ridiculous Halo pistol in its state. But this felt like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was 2 things. Lost a couple levels and turned up the difficulty. So exactly what it felt like to you, which is pretty incredible. And I think that it's funny because the very last level of this game, which is a comic book, drawn out in panels, really cool art style, which we'll get to. But the very last page of it is only half drawn in, which I thought was funny based on the history.
Right.
So contemporary titles at this time, it wasn't competing with Final Fight 1. We already had Final Fight 3 out in 95. Streets of Rage 3 was out in 1994. We already had Tekken 2 and Virtua Fighter 2 and Soul Edge in the arcades. And Virtua Fighter 1 and Tekken 1 were already on the their respective consoles, the Saturn and the PlayStation. So this was really competing with a lot of new stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like at this time, what were you thinking about? Were you thinking about Comix Zone on the Genesis, or were you thinking about your new PlayStation or Saturn?
Probably like action figures that I was playing with.
Oh, yeah.
No, we didn't have the money for a Saturn. That was a big deal. Like, I mean, I read the trades, front to back like everybody else, but like I knew people that had it.
At this time, I was also a Super Nintendo kid, and I played Genesis maybe at friends' houses, the classic story.
Yeah.
I was very interested in Project Reality, the upcoming Ultra 64, aka the Nintendo 64. So that was already buzzing at this time too. So this was one of the most exciting times in gaming history for
3D.
For me. For anyone, really.
Yeah.
Just in general, this was one of the biggest transitions literally ever, but not so much for the end of the Genesis's life with Comix Zone. And for that reason, the game failed to break even.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah, due to the release time frame, all this competition. It shipped with a CD of rock songs though to make it hip, to make it cool.
Oh my God! I wonder if any of those are still good. Like if you can get it on Spotify, or if it's fallen into like the licensing ether or something.
Well, we'll get to a little bit of that pretty soon.
Oh, look at you! It's like I'm setting you up.
Yeah. So the critical reception for this game at the time, EGM gave it a 7.825 out of 10.
Wait. 825. Hang on. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like 825. That was an actual thing that we did back then.
Yeah, I guess so. I think they had a few scores and they averaged them together.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, continue.
A few different editors. Pretty sure that's what EGM did.
That's funny.
Famitsu gave it a 30 out of 40. Next Generation, 3 out of 5. And its overall rating now, well, not now, but when Game Rankings was in existence, was 76%. That was an aggregate of whoever had rated that game.
Huh.
Now, here we go. What happened to those rock songs? Well, the game had a GBA version only in the PAL region in 2002, which basically lost all the comic book effect because it was such a small screen and they couldn't have multiple panels on the screen.
Really?
But then it's been incorporated into so many things since then. In 2002, 4, and 6, it was hidden within the Japanese version of Sonic Mega Collection for the GameCube and then could be unlocked in the Sonic Mega Collection Plus for the Xbox and PS2 and Windows by having a Sonic Heroes game save or by starting all of the other Genesis games at least 50 times. Also in 2006, it was in the SEGA Genesis collection for the PS2 and PSP. In 2007, it was on the Virtual Console on the Wii. 2009, it was on Xbox Live Arcade, and it was in Sonic's Ultimate Genesis collection for 360 and PS3. In 2010, it was released on Steam. And 2011, it was made available for download on the PlayStation Network as part of the SEGA Vintage Collection. In 2017, 6 years later, we get it on iOS and Android as part of the Sega Forever Retro Game Collection, and in 2019, it lands on the Genesis Mini. Now, in 2020, a vinyl record soundtrack of the game's music was announced by record label Cartridge Thunder. And it features the original Sega Genesis soundtrack, as well as live recordings from the band called Roadkill.
That sounds like a passion project. Like they were a vinyl company that was their name. They sound like a bunch of cool dudes that were like, we like video game music. Let's do some records for it. Nowadays that would probably be hugely successful, but back then they probably went under quickly. Like
no, this was 2020.
Oh, it's 2020.
Yeah, it is nowadays. You're exactly right.
That's dope as hell.
Yeah, you could probably find it if you want it bad enough.
I do. Well, I said that because like I'm actually I have a lot of video game records and I haven't heard of this company, so I feel like an idiot right now learning
Oh,
about this.
Cartridge Thunder, baby.
Cartridge Thunder. That's a dope
New
name.
sponsor of the podcast.
Yeah, right. That's a great name.
And there's more. In 2022, last year, it came to Switch Online, Comix Zone. And also in 2022, get this, Sega partnered with Picture Start to produce a movie about Comix Zone. They announced it in August of last year. So we'll see how that develops.
I would put money on that not coming to fruition, but who knows?
Hey, I think it's a cool idea.
It's a great
like
idea.
Cool World. Remember Cool World?
Cool World was great. Made me feel weird things as a kid.
Oh yeah. Hollywood.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the history of the game and its legacy, its re-releases. That's where we're at with the game. So you mentioned that you played it back in the day. Can you expand at all on your history with that game? Any stories in particular? Any vivid memories? Tell me everything you got.
Comix Zone never caught my eye. I was a Super Nintendo kid because back in the day, most households didn't have both consoles,
right?
Or at least in my area, we didn't have a ton of money, so we were Super Nintendo. But every time I played this game, it was always at like someone else's house, or when I was staying with like friends or family or something like that, I would rent it. And yeah, it was definitely like, can I beat this in a weekend type thing before I have to take it back? And I couldn't because it was just, there's a lot to memorize. But I was always, it was like Battletoads level of difficulty where I just had to beat this game, you know what I mean? And I never did back in the day. So I can't say I ever, got that far.
Yeah.
So I prefer, I used to be kind of pro level fighting game player. I've always been really good at fighting games. I really like highly responsive things, back and forth, rock, paper, scissors, love Final Fight. To me, games like Comix Zone, even as a kid, they moved along a little too slowly. They didn't have as many like frames of animation, or it didn't seem like that as a game like Street Fighter or Final Fight. So it just felt a little too slow for me. It couldn't capture my interest. There's nothing special about it. It had that I don't know. I don't want to like the Genesis graphics, but to me that was not as clean as the Super Nintendo. So it looked really kind of like muddy, even though it's bright. There's a lot going on with it. So it just didn't catch my eye. The art style didn't catch my eye. The audio in Genesis games, it just wasn't. The audio processor or whatever the hell it was at the time wasn't as good as the Super Nintendo, so it always turned me off. So the general like lifestyle of the Genesis wasn't there. So there's just something missing for me. Looking at his hair and his outfit, I probably would have thought he was pretty cool back then. I wanted to say one thing too. The writer making the character out to be him, but with like muscles, awesome idea. I can totally relate. Why wouldn't you do that? But no, it's just not something that grabbed me that said like, this is something that I needed to play more often. It was just missing that X factor for me. The more I thought about it as I got older, it was always like smooth gameplay kept me going, because I've always been the type of gamer that I felt like if I made a mistake, then I had to learn from something. And this game definitely feels like that. But it seems like there's a lot of almost RPG-ish Metroidvania, not in terms of going back and forth to areas you've revisited, but like items that you have to pick up to move forward, right? Like you mentioned the rat. You need to pick up the rat if you're going to really do a good, solid playthrough of this. And if you don't know that, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
And it falls into that weird kind of category of, it's not like a left to right beat 'em up. There is some RPG qualities to it, but they seem like not fully fleshed out, as if there's like a good idea there and they could have done a little bit more with. So I don't know. Maybe if I was older back then when this came out, I would have liked it more. But yeah, I was probably the same thing as you. My sights were set on 3D and walking into all these worlds. Like, not to get on a tangent too much, but when you're at Target or something, or wherever you were, and you played Mario 64 for the first time and you heard his footsteps, you heard a video game's character's footsteps, like that was it. That was it. Comix Zone was old news at the time.
So yeah, at the time I was kind of the same. I was really looking forward to the future. I didn't have the Genesis. I was a huge fan of also Final Fight. I liked those sorts of games. I liked Capcom style. I also had similar opinions about the Super Nintendo versus the Genesis. I thought the graphics were cleaner and nicer. I thought
Yeah.
the sound was also less sort of
Video game is a hard,
MIDI-like.
yeah, MIDI
Yeah.
like is, but like back then it's just like it just felt like a video game where like it felt like an orchestra on the
Hmm.
Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo had that wah wah to it.
The
Wah
wah.
wah 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 wah. But I don't think I even played this back then. I remember seeing it maybe in a GamePro magazine or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I may have played it at a friend's house, but I do not have a specific memory of it. And over the years, much later, decades later, I may have like jumped into the first level, and that's really it. So this is another first sort of full play for me, and spoiler alert, it wasn't a full play for me.
So let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Where did you die on your first playthrough? And for anyone who hasn't played it, it's crushingly difficult. If you're, especially if you don't play these a lot, and if you're a button masher, this game is gonna kick your ass within 60 seconds.
Yeah.
How far did you get?
I don't think I finished page 1, but I think I got to the end of it.
Nice.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit more specifically about some of the things that are in this game, some of the mechanics. So,
Okay.
we said it's set up what it looks like a comic book. You're going from panel to panel as your character, kind of a big sprite.
Go in the story. You didn't talk about the story a little bit more, like, the girl that he meets in the beginning, because that's relevant.
Yeah. So yeah, he's all of a sudden it's a thundery night on in New York City. Sketch Turner is working on his comic book, and his villain that he wrote sort of jumps out of the page and says, "Mwahaha, I'm going to put you in the comic book," and all of a sudden he's in the comic book.
It doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you how he actually got out of the comic book.
Yeah, no, he was just there. There was the lightning, I guess. Something like that.
It was the lightning. It was magic lightning. There you go. Somehow Palpatine returned.
Last month on in Another World, it was the lightning at the Hadron Collider that put our hero into another world in the universe. So why not into a comic book?
Nice segue. Good job.
So yeah, he goes into the comic. There's all of a sudden there's this character who he has written, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's his comic book. So this woman, Alyssa something or other, says, "Oh, you got to do all this stuff," and he's like, "What? I'm in a comic book." And this is actually a cool component of this game. Is something I hate in video games now, but in this form, I didn't mind it. He had speech bubbles. They had speech bubbles.
Yeah.
They like little conversation while they're talking.
That's cool.
And these kind of happened all throughout. Little speech bubbles when you get to different areas that kind of give you certain little hints or kind of try to guide the player. Nowadays it's all spoken and it's super annoying. But
Yeah,
this
it
was
is.
okay. And I thought it was pretty cool. So yeah, she tells him, "Yeah, go get on this adventure." And he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll pick up all this stuff." And the game operates as a side-scrolling beat 'em up. You go through the panels. You physically jump from one panel to the other through like the white border or down or left, right. You go in all directions, and you have punches and kicks at your disposal. Little combos you can make, which was more complex than I thought at first because I read the manual. And then 3 item slots where you can use different things like grenades or little bombs or throw a knife or have your rat, which you always want to have.
Yep.
And you go through a page, and when you get to the end, it's over and you move to the next page. And after the second page, you've completed the episode and there's a boss, and you do that a total of 3 times for 6 levels, right? 6 pages, 3 episodes. Okay, so that's what the game's like. Where did you die first to come back to that question?
I died. I was doing really well and I felt pretty cool. I'm like, yeah, this game's hard. And I'm like, I'm killing enemies, and I got a full inventory. I got a health item I haven't used yet, and then I fell into that hole at the end of the level, and then
Oh
it
yeah,
said
on the
like,
last panel of the first page.
yeah, yeah, and then it said
Right.
like, you know, the villain's like, now I'm flesh and blood, and I'm real, and the city is mine, and then it's like game
Straight up
over.
game over.
Yeah, and then I was like, what? That's it? I don't
Yeah.
remember this, and yeah, it was just like. It was immediately like, oh yeah, this is how these games used to be back in the day. Like, every game was this way, and I wasn't holding it against Comix Zone. It was just reminding me of how this type of game operates. Yeah, because like games cost a lot back then in order to get a lot of value out of it, and so people wouldn't, return it or feel like they got gypped. They just make games hard. So every game was hard, like Ghosts and Goblins and that type of thing. What I did like about it though when I was playing was the how much it feels like a comic book. Like if you see my apartment, the walls are like floor to ceiling books and comic books and comic statues and all this stuff. I'm a very big reader of like indie, DC, Marvel, and they really captured that panel aspect really cool, and the way you kick enemies through panels sometimes, but also like I'm playing it right now in the background just to kind of like give myself things to talk about. There's areas in the first level where skeletons are like in the foreground and you can walk behind them, and it's just little cool graphical touches. Like this feels like a labor of love for the people that worked on it.
Yeah. Yeah, the visuals were really detailed to create that vibe.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's partially because they had comic book artists working on it.
Yeah.
Another thing they had, like the foreground, they also had like some little, not particles, but leaves would blow. You would see like little sprites of leaves go across the screen, like various things like that. There would be movement in the panel. The backgrounds, even though they were sort of, like you said, like a little muddy, even though they were colorful, they did have depth. Like they had like sort of a shading to them. It was nice. I thought the visuals really, really were a vibe, as the kids say.
And the between level screen is really cool because it's like a sketch pad, and then there's like the rat on there, and then you can see like a cola can. It just feels like they, the writer made himself as a character, but he also incorporated other things of his life as a writer or, artist, and it definitely feels like a title that it's just missing like one element, and it could have been great, and I don't know what it is. I'm not a game developer, but it just feels like it's just missing something that prevents it from getting to that next level.
Well, I could tell you something it doesn't need. and that is the fact that you lose energy from punching things.
I was going to ask you about that. What you thought?
Hello?
Explain what that is, though.
Okay, so I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, I don't think you lose energy when you hit enemies.
No.
But if they block, do you lose energy?
I don't think if they block you lose energy, but I think during like right now I'm in the game, and like I'm at the start of the second panel or page or whatever, and I dropped
there's a door there.
There's a door, there's a door here, and so I could punch it a bunch of times, and if I punch it,
ton of life.
But what I did was drop the rat. The rat went over to the left side of the screen. He found some dynamite. So now I put the dynamite down and I can open that door.
Yeah, it has this page tear sort of effect where he like rips the background and out pops this this sprite of your sub item.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
But also it kind of means that you just get to every panel and you're like, all right, drop the rat, see if he finds anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of painful because I don't like having to stop and do that. I really like the run and gun type of play style. And so having to drop the rat, and it's exhausting on repeated playthroughs. So if you're running through and you know what to do, and you know that there's going to be like a power up over here you need, or an item, you have to drop the rat, wait for him to go through his animation of going to get the thing.
He
sniffs around, and then you're just like, okay, go. Like, I want to beat this game. Come
on.
It's
right there.
So there's that, it's not the worst thing, but it's as a friend always says, suboptimal.
Yeah. On a first play, though, I feel like it's interesting. Like, ooh, what's he finding?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe not. I don't know.
I think that's cool.
Also, I meant to say, you need to hit the enemies like 1,000 times.
Yeah, you do.
What is up with that?
I think what they were going for was that they wanted a back and forth, almost like fighting game-esque back and forth, where you have to like commit to your moves, make sure you read the enemy. But most enemies,
it did feel like that.
You don't need to do that really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I definitely wanted your perspective on that as a fighting game player and someone who's very good at video games, because I noticed that the way that the controls are set up, you have a wide variety of strikes at your disposal. Like he's got this high kick, the low kick, the sweep, you can do like a tumbling windmill thing, a scissor kick. He can punch and then combo that into something else based on directional input with the D-pad and your attack button.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself trying to combo between things or just kind of mashing?
There's certain enemies that I noticed that require, or not require, but like you certainly benefit from certain play styles. But a lot of the time, it's the way that this works sometimes is unless a character has a uninterruptible move, and if you can cause like any kind of stagger, you're just gonna go to like default. And so like a lot of the times you can just like low kick a bunch of enemies and they'll just keep away from you because the frames are quite a bit, or it's a quick. The attacks are quite quick. They don't take a lot of frames, and the distance is actually a lot for these. So like some of the boss fights, like the first boss fight is an easy thing. Elite type enemies or big enemies, all very easy. They don't represent much of a challenge. So really, in the first page or two, your biggest enemies are the environments, in my opinion. Because you take so much damage from destroying objects that if you don't have the rat, it's like you're almost guaranteed to die just from hitting objects.
Yeah, that's just crazy. I swear that's what they added at the end of development. It was just that one thing, like, let's make hitting things take energy from you. Okay.
Yeah. It's straight. I would love to sit down and talk with some of the people behind this and like ask them why were these design decisions made. Because you've talked to a lot of developers, like certainly more developers than I have, and most of the time developers know what's wrong with their game. Like we had to input that because this asshole at the publisher side wanted that in, and so we had to do that. But
yeah. In an interview much later, Maravik actually said he regretted following the testing department's recommendation to make it harder. He thought that it made the game worse. And he also, it might have been the same interview or a different one, he said he felt development would have greatly benefited from the experienced Japanese staff that did not work on the game at STI, the ones that had left or who were not working. Yeah, he was very candid in these interviews about how like there were things that were not what he would have preferred out of the final product.
Huh. So the testing, well, that's the thing, right? Like as someone who's worked in tests, you'll find testers can blaze through a game very quickly, and they are on a level of like capability that speedrunners are on. But it's like a whole fleet of people, and you'll literally have people that are assigned to beat the game in one sitting on the latest build of the game, and so I can see why they might have that. And I would love to hear like what that dialogue was, or whatever. But on the flip side, if this game wasn't so difficult, you could beat it in just a couple hours.
I watched a video of it after I failed to complete the game, just so I would have some perspective. Yeah, and it was done in 27 minutes, just on a long play.
There you go.
Yeah, that wasn't even, it wasn't even speed running. It was just someone who knew the game, was good at it, and just played through.
And so this game was probably sold at full price and not at all at budget. So, it sounds like they put all their money into the graphics or their time in development, and then there's like not a whole lot to support it.
Yeah, and the effects.
The backgrounds are beautiful. I mean, compared to, like, if anyone... It's easy to look at this game and shit on it now, but if you look at it in context of the time, like, this has way more effort put into it than a lot of titles at the time.
Yeah,
in
it
terms of
is
the
a
visuals.
Genesis game. It is so we always have to remind anyone looking at it, yeah, this is a Genesis game. It's not a retro game that released on Steam in 2019 to look like a Genesis game. It is actually a Genesis game, and it was
Yeah,
actually, what did I say, 2 megabytes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's fun though. It's fun, like from a like I'm fighting this boss right now, just to, like again, to so we can kind of give some feedback on different things. The second boss where he's like, or maybe is it the first boss technically, like the one that's hanging down?
Yeah, that's just, I mean, it's technically the first boss.
Yeah,
It's like a boss every 2 pages. The end of the first page is just a big enemy that recurs. Yeah, that's the spawn mutant queen.
that's right. Yes, that
Yeah.
boss is it definitely feels like cheap, like it's trying to eat your eat your quarters as it were. But I'm sure with more play, I could figure it out, the nuances and all that stuff.
Yeah, so for me, like, it's interesting to talk about that boss because it's kind of weird that there's so much difficulty built into the individual enemies where you have to fight through their blocks and their different, high and low attacks and that sort of thing. And then that enemy is a boss, and essentially I did one thing the entire time. I jumped over the flame, did a jump kick, and pulled away before the hand reached out and slapped me. And I did that as many times as it took for all of its energy to go down.
Now, what's your relationship to Miyazaki games?
They are my top 5 games of all time,
So you
1 through 5.
you're already someone that can like read a boss because you're trained to do that and mess it up, as it were. Do you find that like people like you do you think you've built up those skills from those games? Like if you weren't necessarily someone like that, that you would have maybe had a harder time with that boss?
Um, Maybe. Nah, I think that was just, general video game, old school retro gaming sort of knowledge.
Oh yeah.
That's where that one was. But yeah, the Souls games are my favorite games of all time. That's no secret.
I do find in this game with combat that there is one move that is certainly like much more useful than any other, and that's just like jumping kick. Like you can kill
Mm,
so many enemies just by doing a jump kick and knocking them out. So and it has so much knockback for some enemies too. And like I don't know if there's any invincibility frames. As you know as well as I do that Miyazaki games too, there's a lot of invincibility frames on like rolls and different things like that. So learning it,
mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I just don't know what this game would be if it didn't have the difficulty as it is right now.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I found the combat to be the most boring part of it
Yeah.
because it actually does a lot of interesting things with the environment. In addition to just the aesthetic and the way that the comic book style is incorporated into the gameplay, there are actions that you do that interact with the environment and not just the backgrounds or the transitional portions of it, but items placed within the panels. Like, some examples are there's a hole in the ground and you have to cover it up with a big rock because
Yeah, yeah.
enemies are flooding in, or you have to push an explosive box down a trap door so that it lands on top of some flaming barrels below you so that you don't take damage when you land on those.
See,
And
that's
you have to
cool.
figure out a lot of these little things that will save you, like a hit here and a hit there, that would add up to your death in the end. Otherwise, you can't make it through the level without dying because you just don't have the hit points, essentially.
And that's what a lot of people playing for the first time won't notice. They'll think it's just
Right.
a normal beat 'em up, and that they're like all these layers aren't there. And I think that's what I was saying. Like there's something here that could be just truly amazing. And this is one of the things like we always talk about this when we do this. You probably say this a lot too. It's like if this game were made today, here's what I would do, or here's the ways that they could
Hmm.
improve it. And it just seems like there's just something missing in that regard. Because that's cool. Like, if that was like the
Yeah,
run
that's
and gun
super cool.
aspect of it, you had to figure out situations on the fly. Maybe, hear me out, Comix
Hmm.
Zone as a roguelite.
Yeah. It already almost is because I die so much. Right? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. It's just, I feel like it just got overshadowed by some of the bad stuff. Like, for example, there's that same panel actually with the moving the rock over the hole in the ground. They then demand that you destroy 3 more of these rocks stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
And these are substances that will take health away from you when you punch them. And you have to hit each one of them a ton of times. And you have to get rid of all 3 of them before you're able to move to the next panel. That gives you an arrow and says you can go through now. You lose so much health. But if you happen to have the dynamite, you blow that whole stack up in one go, and you might be able to get one right there from dropping the rat, and he finds it in the background for all I know. I don't remember. But that's cool that it has that other way to get through it. You just have to be able to do it. Like you have to think to search for those things, or you have to play through it once and then come back and remember to say, okay, in order to make it to the end of this page with enough health to survive, I need to save my dynamite for this point so I don't have to punch rocks for a half hour.
I can see in that situation, what I used to do is I used to take a pen and paper like a lot of people did and like write down notes on how to beat things. Like level 2 has this, or I could definitely see a young me like making a map of every level and every item, and then being like, okay, this is the most optimal way to beat it. All like this is taking me back to that whole other time, and that was just kind of fun. It was just a fun thing to do.
Yeah. Other cool things. This had diverging paths that you could go one way or the other, and you would never see what you didn't go to until the next time you played, and then eventually they would meet up again, and you'd continue out the level. That's pretty cool. It had the boss from Big Trouble in Little China on the second area. It had the guy with the fingernails.
That's right. Yeah.
And the rat does more than just, we've kind of harped on him finding stuff in the background, but the rat kind of like fights a little bit.
Yeah.
Doesn't really help a lot, but also helps with the environmental puzzling as well. You can send the rat to trip levers on the sides of the panels that will affect. One example I'm thinking of is there's a fan that is spinning. And if you try to hit it while it's spinning, you not only take the damage that you would take from punching it, but you get hit as if getting hit by an enemy. It's impenetrable. But if you send the rat, he goes under and goes and flips a lever. It stops the thing from moving, and now you can punch it and take damage from punching it, but you destroy it. And then you can proceed.
It doesn't send you back flying.
Yeah. There are a few things like that. There's a lot of stuff like that where you have to use the rat to do a thing. Like there's one later on where you have to get through this wall, a spiky wall that closes. And if you hit the switch, it opens but closes immediately. So you have to go stand over near it, wait, drop the rat, let him walk off screen. And then once it goes up, you quickly go through or roll through or something. Mm-hmm. So it's really well thought out in some ways using the rat and stuff. And I don't know if you did this, but I don't know how it was possible, but I saw it in the video I watched, was Sketch Turner, our hero, somehow just by himself rips the back of the panel, the background, and pulls out an airplane, a paper airplane, and throws it, and it goes back and forth and hits stuff for like pretty significant damage.
You have to sacrifice some of your health for that.
How do we do that?
I think you have to press up or hold up or something like that.
Oh, that's just a regular move. You could do it anytime.
Yeah, I was reading up about the game, before this, and they were saying that, but I hadn't tried it when I was playing before. Let me try it again. It's
another thing is that when I was playing through and I figured out you could do these kind of cool moves like the scissor kick or the M. Bison sort of kick. I started doing them a lot because they were really strong.
Yep.
And then I realized, half my health is gone because every time you do one of those moves, you lose health.
Yep.
That sucked. So I had to change.
I mean, the block is great too. It has a, block mechanic. It has normals. It has, if you hold down, you can do a little stabby kick. It's almost like Ryu's down B move in Street Fighter that he has, and his uppercut is definitely like Shoryuken. Like it's definitely inspired by Street
Really
Fighter.
Good for those flying enemies.
Yeah, it is. And the jump kicks, it's like a dive kick almost, but it doesn't do the dive mechanic. And yeah, if you jump straight up, he does like a whirlwind kick, like a Van Damme kick. So yeah, there's like lots of different ways to handle it, but the secret stuff, I don't know how to do it. We should definitely look up how to do that. How do you do the paper airplane? God, I really should have put the research in, I guess.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
So did you finish the game this time?
No, I didn't play it that much.
No.
I played it a bunch. I played for a couple hours last night and today, and I see what the game is doing. I see what it needs me to do. I see what it wants me to do, and like it's gonna take me a while to get through this process. And these days, I need a little bit more meat, story wise, believe it or not, just to keep going. Like I was actually interested in the idea, like this whole concept of this game, right? This guy going into this world that he built, awesome. He has these special powers that he can do that no one else can. He has, fourth wall breaking in the comic because he's clearly not there. Like there's a lot of potential there for stuff, but it doesn't happen often enough. And the difficulty is too high for me to want to keep going through this game. If it had like a gripping story, then I might be going again. But like, it's hard to revisit some titles, and that's why I struggled with this one. That's why I didn't finish it.
Got it. This game had 2 endings? I didn't mention this.
Yeah, a good ending and a bad ending.
Yeah. That's something.
Can you imagine putting in all that time to learn the game and then getting the bad ending? But I guess the silver lining is that you'll need to take 27 minutes more to beat it again.
Yeah. It's basically the difference between rescuing Alyssa or getting her locked inside of a nuclear rocket. Whatever.
Okay, wait. What's the big choice? Is it like A, B? Do I want to leave my girlfriend
No. It's, was I fast enough to hit the switch after beating the final boss before the thing blew up? And if I was, I got the good ending. And if I wasn't, I got the bad ending.
Oh my God.
Exactly. So that's a good point to get to our sort of final thoughts. I like to always think about, since it's kind of like a book club here, where I would think that some of the listeners would want to play the games and then come and listen to the podcast. It's sort of like a recommendation of whether we think people should play, but it's also a mini review of, do we think it was worth it to go back and play this? Was it worth the time? So ultimately the question is, would you call this more of a smash or more of a brick?
Ooh, you know what? Like I said before, if I was young, I would have called this a brick.
Yeah,
for sure. Like it just didn't capture me. But as I get older and I recognize when talented people attempt to do interesting things, I think it's a smash in that regard. I think they did a good job, and they maybe things changed or whatever. Like I said, there's just so much cool stuff here. That it just missed the mark. So I'm going to say it's a smash based on the fact alone that the creators tried.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm going to say a lot of the same as what you just said and a lot of what we've been talking about. But ultimately, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze on this one. Kind of like what you were saying, you need something more. I don't know necessarily that there's something here that I would feel like someone should go back and play it because like it's a must play or something like that. I would sooner say go play some other game. This is a cool concept. It does some cool things, but the experience was not as much fun as I would like it to be, and it didn't really reveal so much of an interesting history that I thought it was worth it. So I'm going to say no on this one from me.
I can see that point of view too.
Yeah.
Like it was at times, like I played it last night and I played it for probably 30 minutes and I was like, I'm just not in the mood. Like the second and third time I died, I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta go back to the mini screen and all that. And then like I said, the mouse doing his thing, and it really felt like I was going through the motions of this game, getting to the point where I needed to get to learn something more about the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hard to do that these days with so much content out there being so good. But I would say if you can buy this on sale, or if you buy like on Steam or another platform for $5, or if you have a Genesis Mini, play it for 30 minutes or an hour just as a piece of history, because like it's so talked about and so revered in some circles that like, look, would I pay $60 for this now as we did back then? No, I would not do that.
But when it comes on a console with 20 other games, maybe it's fine to give it some time.
It's totally fine. Yeah. Like this is the type of thing, and this is how I play Genesis Minis, or any of the mini console comes out. I get it. My wife's like, you got another one of those. Why? And I sit her down, I run her through games, and she nods her heads and smiles, and she's very nice and cordial. And then she learns a bit about gaming history that she won't care about 10 minutes after. But like, it's just fun to nerd out about the history of the games and some of the ups and downs and the creative maybe misfires or attempts. And I think this one,
as a historian,
looking back, as a historian, I think it's enough to, like, play it for 30 minutes just so you can mention it at a bar.
Yeah. I like that. But you mentioned the feeling of, I don't really want to play. Sometimes that feeling is enough on its own to tell me what I need to know about whether the game is worth it or not. If I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got to play Comix Zone. I tried it once already, but like, I don't really want to keep playing it. That says something.
Hopefully you have someone on the other end of the podcast that like actually played the game. Then you're like, okay, well, I can lean on that person.
Oh, I will say that I did make it. You were starting to ask how far I got. I got to what's his name? Lopan. I don't know what his real name is in the game. That guy from Big Trouble in Little China. He's called Kung Fung. Yeah, I got to him and didn't get past him.
Coming out of this, the biggest takeaway I have, or the biggest like question, is I want to know what they said to like the American team or the Japanese team that was like, this is the most American game. Like, it's the embodiment of everything. Because that, like, what was the Americanization of video games that annoyed them so much, and the points that the development team took pride in, like, what was it? That sounds so interesting.
It is interesting because they said it embodied everything that was wrong with American culture, but like it didn't really represent American culture. There wasn't much culture in the game.
I don't see it. Maybe it's the second level is like a caricature of Asian culture. Maybe it's that second level.
Yeah, I guess there was sort of an insult there.
Yeah. Would this hold up these days? Would it be viewed as culturally insensitive? I don't want to say yes or no, but maybe there were some thoughts there that the U.S. team, or maybe it was just the game design itself they didn't like, or maybe they didn't like the main character's haircut or the mixing of sneakers and shorts. Who knows?
Could be. Who knows?
I don't know. Yeah, that's one thing that I'll be, out tonight, if we go out and have a drink, me and my wife, I'll be like, what was that? And I'll tell her about this situation. I'll tell her about the game. So at least it's a conversation starter in that regard.
Yeah.
Well, dude, this is really fun.
Yeah.
Thanks again for inviting me on this. This was a good game for me to revisit, because I'm really happy that I got to see it through the different lens. Because I was ready to just jump on this podcast and be like, that game, it was a piece of shit back in the day. But yeah, it was really nice to look through it through the lens of a grizzled veteran.
Yeah, a little bit more appreciative of what you saw.
For sure.
Nice.
I'd still give Grand Theft Auto 4 a 8.7, by the way. I'm not more appreciative of that.
I would also give The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on the Wii an 8.7 and get Nintendo to stop giving us games at the same publication that Rockstar stopped giving us games for an 8.7. But that's another story.
You did that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
8.7 is the dreaded score. Don't give anything an 8.7 if you're a video game reviewer. And
Well, 8.5 just felt
giant
too
publication.
low. Yeah, it 8.5 just felt too low though. That 0.2, I mean, they earned that 0.2.
It was good enough for the 0.2 over 8.5. All right, Kyle, this was great. Thanks for coming on. And everybody check out Robot Cache.
Please.
Yeah, sounds cool.
We have some interesting things coming down the line for it. Like I said, if people write into you and they say, hey, Eddie, could I get an invite for that Robot Cache? I'll try to set them up. No promises on turnaround time, but yeah.
Sweet. And to all the listeners, you know the drill with Smashing Bricks. You can find us on whatever platform you're listening to right now or any other podcasting platform of your choice. You can go to anchor.fm/smashingbricks for the links out to all of those different platforms. And for the next episode, it is once again a mystery guest and mystery game, which will be announced on Instagram shortly. So you can check that to find out what we're going to be playing, and you can play along. You can drop us a line at smashingbrickspodcast@gmail.com with all your thoughts about Comix Zone or any of our previous games or our upcoming game once it's announced on Instagram. And you can also go to the Smashing Bricks Retro Games list, or the SBRGL, as I like to call it to myself, and see all the games that I have listed that could potentially be picked for future episodes. And feel free to drop a line if you see one that you want me to play with an upcoming guest. Say, hey, that game on there, that looks great. I loved that game as a kid. I want you to play it. I want to play it again along with the show. Or if you see something that isn't there, if you don't see something that isn't there, then recommend it. Drop me a line. Same email address, smashingbrickspodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Until next time, my friends, thank you for listening. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on. I hope that you may come on a future episode.
For sure.
And do this again.
Yes.
So until next time, everybody, may the nostalgia be with you.
Woo! This is when metal goes big. We're gonna have the comic game. Turns out that's wrong. Cut the budget. Cut the budget.
Turns out we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
Cut the game.
We haven't released the game. What about that Comix Zone? Release it. It's not done yet. Release it though.